Welcome back. Here's a question that sounds simple and almost never has a good answer inside organizations. Who is in charge of AI? Ask it in your next meeting and watch the room. The CIO points at the data science team, data science points at the business points at legal. That awkward silence is where this chapter lives. So here's what we'll focus on. First, oversight from the very top, the board's role in setting tone, appetite, and accountability for AI, and how an AI governance committee should actually be composed and connected to enterprise governance, not floating beside it as decoration. Second, the cast of characters. Chief AI officers, CISOs, DPOs, ethics review boards, and crucially, internal audit's own delicate position. When are we independent assurance and when do we cross into advisory territory? Third, the machinery of accountability. RACI matrices, decision rights, and how to spot the accountability gaps where everyone is involved and no one is answerable. And fourth, the paper that governs the practice, acceptable use policies, data governance policies, model development standards, responsible AI policies, and the approval workflows that either genuinely gate risk or just rubber stamp it. By the end, you'll be able to walk into any organization and sketch its real AI power map, not the org chart version, the true one. If you're enjoying this series, subscribe and share it with a colleague in GRC. Let's find out who's in charge. Every governance story starts in the same room, the boardroom. And here's the principle the AAIA exam and real life both reward. If the board isn't genuinely overseeing AI, nothing below the board can fully compensate. Tone from the top isn't a poster slogan, it's the operating system everything else runs on. What does board oversight of AI actually look like? At minimum, four things. The board understands, in plain terms, where AI is used in the business and what could go wrong. It has approved an AI strategy and risk appetite. How much AI risk, in which areas, for what reward. It receives regular, honest reporting, not just success stories. And it has assigned clear accountability, whether to a full board, an audit or risk committee, or a dedicated technology committee. Now the reality check. Board members are rarely AI experts, and that's fine. They aren't cybersecurity engineers either, yet they oversee cyber risk. The question isn't expertise, it's engagement. I love asking this in interviews with directors. Tell me about the last AI-related decision this board made. If the answer is a blank look or we approve the budget, oversight is ceremonial. If the answer is we debated whether to deploy the credit model given the fairness testing results and ask for monthly monitoring reports, that's a governing board. For your audits, look for evidence with dates and signatures, board minutes discussing AI risk, an approved appetite statement, education sessions for directors, and escalation paths that actually reach the board. Remember the auditor's proverb, if it isn't minuted, it didn't happen. The tone from the top should be audible in the paperwork. One level below the board sits the engine room of AI governance, the AI Governance Committee. Some organizations call it the AI Steering Committee or the Responsible AI Council. The name matters less than two questions. Who sits at the table and does the table have teeth? Let's start with composition. A credible committee is cross-functional by design. You want the technology voice, typically the CIO or CTO, and the data science leadership who actually build models. You want risk and compliance because someone must speak the language of appetite and regulation. Legal for liability and contracts. The privacy officer because AI eats personal data for breakfast. Security because models are attack surfaces. HR when AI touches hiring or workforce decisions. And critically, the business owners whose processes the AI serves, because governance without the business becomes an ivory tower issuing memos nobody reads. Here's a story that shows why composition matters. At one company I worked with, the committee was entirely technologists, brilliant people. They approved a customer-facing chatbot on technical merits, and it launched with no legal review of the advice it might give. The first regulatory complaint arrived within weeks. Nobody at the table had been paid to ask that question, so nobody asked it. Now the teeth. A real committee has a charter defining its authority. Can it approve, delay, or kill AI initiatives, or does it merely advise? It keeps minutes, tracks decisions, and meets on a rhythm, not just after incidents. As an auditor, request the charter, the membership list, and the last 6 months of minutes. Then check one thing above all. Has this committee ever said no? A gate that always opens is just a decoration. Here's a failure pattern I see everywhere, and once you spot it, you can't unsee it. An organization builds a beautiful AI governance framework, committee, policies, principles, the works, and it floats beside the real governance of the company like a boat tied loosely to a ship. Separate risk register, separate reporting line, separate vocabulary. Then one day, the ship turns and the boat just drifts. The principle to internalize is this: AI governance must be an extension of enterprise governance, not a parallel universe. What does that mean concretely? AI risks belong in the enterprise risk register, weighed by the same criteria as credit risk, cyber risk, and operational risk, so leadership sees one integrated picture. AI investment decisions flow through the same portfolio governance as other technology spent. AI incidents feed the same escalation channels, and AI performance reporting lands in the same committee packs the board already reads, not in a glossy separate deck that arrives quarterly and is admired briefly. Why does the parallel universe version fail? Because resources, attention, and authority live in the main structure. I watched a company where the AI Ethics Council flagged a high-risk use case, but the project had already been funded through the normal investment committee, which had never heard of the Ethics Council. Guess which decision stood? Governance that isn't wired into money and authority is theater. So in your audits, trace the connections like an electrician. Does the AI committee report into an established governance body? Do AI risks appear in the enterprise risk report the board sees? When AI governance says stop, what mechanism actually stops the project? Follow the wiring, not the diagrams. Integrated governance hums. Parallel governance just poses for photographs. Let's meet the named characters in the AI governance play, because the AAIA exam loves asking who is responsible for what, and real audits turn on exactly that question. First, the Chief AI Officer, the newest title on the executive floor. Where it exists, the CAIO owns AI strategy, coordinates adoption across the business, and champions responsible AI practices. Think of them as the conductor, not playing every instrument, but accountable for the orchestra's sound. In organizations without a CAIO, that role scatters across the CIO, CDO, or CTO, and your audit task is finding where the pieces actually landed, if anywhere. Next, the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer. Their AI concern is the security of models, training data, APIs, and pipelines. Everything we'll cover in the threats chapter. The classic gap? The CISO's team protects traditional systems brilliantly, while AI systems were built by a data science team the CISO barely knows. Two kingdoms, one unguarded border. Then the DPO, the Data Protection Officer, familiar to all my privacy students. Wherever AI processes personal data, the DPO advises on lawful basis, oversees impact assessments, and serves as the regulator's contact point. Here's a subtlety worth remembering. The DPO must remain independent, advising rather than owning the processing. So a DPO who approves AI systems as their business owner has a conflict baked in. Finally, the Ethics Review Board, a panel assessing AI use cases against fairness and human impact principles, often including external voices. Powerful when it has authority, decorative when it's consulted after decisions are made. Your audit lens for all four is identical: written mandate, real authority, actual evidence of exercising both. Titles are easy, teeth are rare. Now we turn the spotlight on ourselves. What is internal audit's proper role in the AI story? This sounds like a philosophy question, but get it wrong and you compromise the very independence that makes your opinion worth anything. The exam tests this, and careers stumble on it. Here's the tension: AI is new, expertise is scarce, and the organization is hungry for guidance. So the data science team invites audit into design meetings. Help us build the governance framework, they say. Review our model before launch. Tell us what controls to add. Flattering, useful, and dangerous. Because think ahead 2 years, that AI system fails, and the board asks internal audit to investigate. Investigate what exactly? A framework you helped design? Controls you recommended? You'd be grading your own homework and everyone would know it. The 3 lines model gives us the map. Management owns and manages risk, that's the first line. Risk and compliance functions oversee and support, the second line. Internal audit provides independent assurance, the third line, and independence is the whole product. Now, advisory work isn't forbidden. Standards allow audit to advise, especially on emerging risks like AI, provided safeguards exist. The rules of the road are clear. Never take management decisions, never own controls, document the advisory nature of the engagement, and ensure those who advised don't later audit the same area, or that sufficient time and disclosure separate the two. Practically, I suggest audit teams keep an advisory log for AI work. Who advised on what, when? It protects you, and it's exactly the evidence an external quality reviewer will request. Be the trusted voice in the room, absolutely. Just never forget which chair you're sitting in. Let's talk about the most unglamorous, most powerful tool in governance, the RACI matrix. If you remember one lesson from this chapter during fieldwork, make it this one. Because accountability gaps are where AI incidents are born. Quick refresher. RACI maps every activity to 4 roles. Responsible, who does the work. Accountable, the single person who answers for the outcome. And yes, single is the rule. One throat to choke, as the blunt saying goes. Consulted, whose input is sought. Informed, who's kept in the loop. Simple grid, profound effect, because it forces an organization to write down who owns what. Now apply it to AI and watch the interesting questions surface. Who is accountable for training data quality? The data engineering team that pipes it, or the business that generated it? Who is accountable when the model drifts? Data science who built it, or operations who run it? Who decides a model is fair enough to launch? Who can order an emergency shutdown at 2 a.m. and does the on-call engineer know that name? In most organizations, the first draft of an AI RACI is a revelation, full of cells where 3 teams claim responsibility and accountability belongs to no one. Everyone waters the plant, nobody owns the garden. Here's a field story. After an incident where a mispricing model ran wild for 6 hours, we asked who had authority to switch it off. The answer involved 4 teams and a change approval process designed for planned maintenance. 6 hours of losses, purely from an undefined decision, right? So as an auditor, request the AI RACI. If none exists, that's a finding. If one exists, test it. Pick 3 scenarios: drift, a bias complaint, a security alert, and ask the named people if they know they're named. Paper accountability that people haven't heard of is just paper. From structures and people, we now move to paper, the policies that translate governance intent into daily behavior. Today, 2 foundational documents, the AI Acceptable Use Policy and the Data Governance Policy. Unsexy names, enormous consequences. Start with acceptable use. Ever since generative AI tools exploded, every employee with a browser has a super intelligent intern at their fingertips. Wonderful for productivity, terrifying without rules. An AI acceptable use policy answers the practical questions. Which AI tools are approved? What data may go into them? And here's the big one. May employees paste customer data, source code, or confidential strategy into public chatbots? Who must review AI-generated output before it's used? What must be disclosed to clients, to regulators in published content? The famous cautionary tale is the electronics giant whose engineers pasted proprietary chip designs into a public chatbot to debug code. Helpful bot, permanent leak. A one-page policy and a training session would have cost nothing. Then data governance for AI. Your organization likely has data policies already, but AI stresses them in new ways. Training data needs documented lineage, where did it come from, and what rights attached to it. Purpose limitation matters. Data collected for billing doesn't automatically become fair game for model training. Quality standards, retention rules, and access controls all need AI-specific teeth because a model trained on wrong data doesn't just store the error, it industrializes it. Your audit approach for both is the same three-step rhythm. Does the policy exist and cover AI explicitly? Do employees know it? Test awareness, not just distribution logs. And is it enforced? Ask for an example of a violation and what happened next. A policy without a consequence story is a suggestion. Two more documents complete the AI policy stack, and these two speak directly to the builders. The Model Development Standard tells data scientists how to build. The Responsible AI Policy tells the whole organization what may be built. Let's take them in turn. The Model Development Standard is essentially a building code for models. Just as a construction code specifies wiring and fire exits without designing your house, this standard specifies the non-negotiables of model building. Documentation requirements at each life cycle stage, mandatory validation and bias testing before launch, version control for data, code, and models, peer review of modeling decisions, reproducibility requirements, remember Chapter 3, approved tools and environments. Why does this matter to you as an auditor? Because a standard converts good practice from a personal virtue into a testable obligation. Without it, every audit becomes an argument about opinions. With it, you simply test conformance. When I audit a data science function, my first request is always the same: show me your development standard. The quality of that document predicts the quality of everything else. The Responsible AI Policy sits above, declaring the organization's principles: fairness, transparency, human oversight, safety, privacy, and drawing red lines. Perhaps the company will never use AI for social scoring or emotion recognition in hiring, or fully automated dismissals. Good policies also define how principles become practice: impact assessments for high-risk use cases, escalation routes, review boards. Here's the connective insight. The Responsible AI Policy without a development standard is poetry without plumbing. The standard without the policy is plumbing without direction. Audit them as a pair and test the joint between them. Pick one principle, say fairness, and trace it down to a specific required test in the standard. If the trace breaks, you found the gap between what the organization says and what it builds. We close this chapter with the moment of truth in any governance system: the approval gate. Policies and committees mean nothing until a specific AI system arrives at a specific gate and someone decides go or no go. Today, we learn to audit that moment. A healthy AI approval workflow looks something like this. A proposed use case is classified by risk. Remember, a movie recommender and a loan decisioning model deserve different scrutiny. Higher risk systems trigger deeper review, impact assessments, bias testing evidence, security review, legal sign-off, and finally, a decision by a body with authority, often that governance committee we met earlier. The decision is recorded, conditions are tracked, and deployment cannot technically proceed without the approval, ideally enforced in the pipeline itself, not just in a spreadsheet. Now, the disease this lesson is named after: rubber stamping. The workflow exists, the boxes get ticked, and everything passes. How do you detect it? I use 3 tests in the field. First, the rejection rate. Ask how many AI initiatives were rejected, or sent back in the last year. A gate that approved 40 out of 40 isn't a gate, it's a corridor with paperwork. Second, the timing test. Compare approval dates against project timelines. When approvals consistently land 2 days before a launch that was announced months earlier, the decision was made elsewhere and the committee just signed the marriage certificate. Third, the conditions test. Good committees approve with conditions, retrain quarterly, add human review, fix these bias metrics. Pull 3 conditional approvals and check whether anyone tracked the conditions to closure. Untracked conditions are the purest form of governance theatre. And one final question that never fails. Find something the organization decided not to do with AI and ask why. Organizations with real governance have stories of restraint. Organizations without it only have launches. That's chapter 5. Next up, we go deeper into model ownership, governance metrics, and the third parties behind your AI. See you in the next one.